welcome everybody to the UKBC, an interview with Neil. But tonight's going to be a little bit different because we've got Graham Paine, champion breeder. We've known each other quite a while now, haven't we, Graham?
Yeah.
So, and we intend this to be a very open discussion about the problems we've had with our birds because Graham and we supported each other way back, and we still chat now. We've still got our own problems, but we've tackled them probably in very different ways. So, so welcome, Graham, and thank you for agreeing to this because, I don't think you've ever held back in letting people know the problems, and I hope people can learn something from us, really.
I think it's the only way, Neil. If everyone lives in denial, it's not going to help the hobby because we have a lot of problems with these birds, and unless people know how to go about it, it's going to force people out of the hobby, basically. So you've got to try and help people and guide people as best you can.
Yeah, and I think that's where we're trying to get to these new beginners, or even beginners that are at the end of their tether. Even novices, I suppose they're called now, aren't they? But yeah, and I think looking back, I only ever had pigeon and canary men around me for many years. And right back at the very, very start, so what's that, probably 31 years ago, I mean, I had psittacosis and lost the whole lot. Bang, gone. That was it. Empty shed. But again, there was no budgie vet. There was no budgie family to talk to. I just had to get the antibiotics that the vet thought would work, and they never did.
No.
And then, but I did rebuild and, came back. And that was before it even found showbirds. So,
So what is the cure for it then?
Psittacosis I think is basically antibiotics, but I mean, I've never really spoken to Kevin or anybody about it because I haven't had that problem since. Well, as far as I know, and touch wood, my birds are pretty healthy at the moment. So yeah, it was a strange one because unfortunately, again, I was buying from auctions, you see, because I was going to, bird auctions in general. So, I had quail running down the bottom, lovebirds, cockatiels, budgies. I did have finches for a while, but they got out of a hole and they were gone overnight. I was like, where are they gone? And finally found the hole they got out of. And I had all sorts of things. I even I had a dove in there at one point. That's the worst thing to have in with, parrot-like birds and that because of the transfer of diseases. But yeah, so I mean the where I wanted to start really, and I've got so many or haven't got any photos really to share. So we'll perhaps chat about mine first and then we'll move on to yours. But mine was probably, I was trying to work it out today, and I reckon it started about 10 years ago when I thought I finally got the eye for a good budgie. And I was desperate. I was like, oh, this is ridiculous. I've got all crap birds. So I went out and I spent a fair bit of money, for me, that is. And I bought birds from 4 different places, all champions, but there was only one stud in all of those 4 that were worth buying from. I'm not going to mention any names because the outcome of this was not good. And I'm not blaming necessarily each individual one because it could have been just one. But basically, I bought them back in, didn't do any quarantine. My setup at the time was a shed so rammed with breeding cages and just cages in general that you could hardly swing a cat in there. And of course, what happened? French molt. And that turned into 2 years of breeding because nobody had told me to stop. I didn't know what to do. 2 years of like 80 birds each year and only probably 1 or 2 good ones fully feathered out of the entire lot. So I didn't know where to turn, and it was that time that I met up with an old mentor, Kevin, um, and then I met Kevin Eatwell as well via Facebook and things like that by then. And it progressed. So we managed to come through probably the third year with better birds. You know, they were obviously building up an immunity to it. And everybody said, "Oh, you must stop breeding." I said, "Well, I have sort of stopped breeding. They've been settled, you know, and so I was still breeding with French molt birds. And in the end, we came through that, and I wasn't breeding um, French Malters. But something interesting you said the other day to me about diet, I started breeding feather dusters.
Yeah.
And it was like, well, where have they come from? Because, you know, my birds back then weren't buff. They were
No.
yellow to intermediate, you know, and I'm thinking, well, you know, and I mean, at the time, Simon Gage was somebody who I spoke to quite regularly, you know, and he had to pull me in and say, you know, no, come on, you know, it's a duster, it happens, you know, it's genetic. But looking back now, whipping forward, I haven't actually bred one for quite a while. Now that's touch wood, obviously. So that we got through that, and then I stayed with it. Um, and all of a sudden, I started getting chicks that I couldn't wean. They were literally coming out of the nest box like a bag of bones. And that was when Kevin started to help me. And we decided, or he decided, that he was pretty sure that that was polymer virus still in my birds from the French molt, but had sort of manifested itself into young bird sickness, whatever you want to call it. Um, and yeah, and I had to do, it was very difficult. I had to do survival of the fittest because there was nothing I could give them. And that was when the big change in the diet came, you know, the use of Garvo, mealworms, and but in that interim time, I'd thrown everything at them, every product you could think of. It was costing me like £80 a month just for the ingredients. Then there was medication on top that I didn't really need. Um, so yeah, then I changed, and even Kevin Ewell said to me, "Look, just go back to basics." He said,
Yeah.
"You've got to go back and rebuild." And that those few words were the catalyst of where I am now.
Yeah.
You know, the Garvo, I mean, the Garvo changed my birds in 6 weeks, and that's
Wow.
no word of a lie. You know, they were ready to breed in 6 weeks' time, and these were chicks that some I'd had to hand feed to get them to wean. You
Yeah.
know, they did give me problems in the nest, but a couple of the hens, soft-shelled eggs, you know, all those sort of usual problems. Um, but you know, fast forward another probably 7 years, and I am where I am. You know, so yeah, you know, and I still get the odd addled egg, and that was something I missed actually. You know, with this, the chicks not weaning, I was also getting nest boxes full of addled eggs. So of course, when they actually hatched, they were pretty weak, you know, and then didn't develop properly. Um,
Yeah.
but now, you know, I still get addled eggs like we all do. And like I said, I think probably before we started recording, you know, I live on a main railway line where we have 120-mile-an-hour trains come through at 1 in the morning. Um, you know, and I know for a fact that I seem to have cockbirds that go in the nest box.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's two
Fantastic.
possibles. So yeah, so I mean that really is you know, my story in a nutshell, really. And you know, I've come down to the decision that if you don't get your nutrition right and you don't get, you know, healthy birds in, or you deal with them in quarantine, that's where it all goes wrong. It really does start at the beginning, you know. So
I really am leaning towards diet issues with respect to feather dusters. You know, you're quite right. Why should two perfectly normal birds suddenly throw something out that is defying any form of logic. It's we say we're pushing nature too far, but if two normal, and I mean normal showbirds, throw out a duster, why should they do that? And I think a lot of the time there, you will have certain youngsters that just need more food. I mean, humans are like it. Some people have got larger appetites and they grow taller, shorter, and what have you. It happens. And if they're not getting the right diet and enough of the right vitamins, etc., or the mother's not producing enough, she'll keep the normal ones going, but one that just needs a little bit more, it starts to go out of control. And I'm pretty sure that's the case, because there are so many different forms of what they call a duster. You get the ones that look like a hawk with that really curved beak. You get ones that don't grow very much; they're stunted. Again, I know we'll touch on this a little bit later on, but I'm convinced calcium deficiency has a big impact on the development of youngsters, especially when they are developing slowly. It's a hard hobby, and to get to grips with it and to really understand it is not easy.
No, I mean, I had somebody the other day, fair, a novice beginner, if you want to call him, and he was putting calcium powder into his soft food, but had no source of vitamin D.
No.
So he was getting soft-shelled eggs. Didn't have any problems with hens necessarily yet, but he was only into his third. I think this was his third breeding season, and of course he'd started to get soft-shelled eggs and all that. And actually, it took us a while for the discussion to sort of build up and talk about diet, and him opening up to me about what he feeds, because I think he thought I was just gonna tell him he was stupid and didn't know what he was doing. But we got his trust, built it up, and he's added cod liver oil now to his soft food, and hopefully, his next round, or his first round this year will be better.
But then again, you see, even cod liver oil, you can overdo it with it if you're not careful. It can kill a bird as fast as anything.
Yeah. Oh, I think you can go, too far. I mean, that's what happened with me when I was spending all that money on all these potions from the horse food shop. When I actually analysed it, I think every single one of them that I was feeding had calcium in it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So your parts per million or whatever they measure it by must have been astronomical.
Well, I remember when I came back into the hobby after a 20-year layoff, and I bought birds off Gerald Binks just as he was finishing. And prior to that, I'd kept birds. I kept budgies since I was 12. But I never used to show. I used to get involved with the guy that did show, so I had a little bit of an idea of what was going on. But I was always very conscious that my birds weren't good enough, and so I wasn't going to get into that. But when I came back second time round, I thought, well, why not? Let's take it a little bit further. And Gerald Binks was absolutely fantastic with some of the things that he told me in the couple of hours I was with him that I've still not forgotten till this day. And one of them, I'll come to cod liver oil in a minute, but one of them is something you were saying earlier when you came back and you bought from 4 champion breeders. And one of the things that Gerald Binks said to me, when you start a stud of your own, you really don't want to introduce birds from more than maybe 1 or 2 studs, because these breeders have obviously spent time, money developing their studs, and the last thing you want to do is completely dilute all the work they've done by putting everything together. And he said, you've got to remember also that there are a lot of champion breeders, but very few have champion birds. And that I didn't really understand where it sunk in, but I didn't really understand what he was saying at the time. And I think if the BS had had a relegation system and promotion system, like a league table, you'd have a higher level of quality in the champion section. And sometimes you feel a bit sorry for some of these guys because they can't keep up with buying in outcrosses where they may need to do so, and they'd have more fun and more competition if they were a little bit further down, maybe in the intermediate section. But of course, there's no way back once you get up there.
No, and I think, and that takes me back to what I said. Yeah, like you said about 4 different champions, but actually one of those was only had champion birds. The other 3 I might was not bothered in the end.
Exactly. And you see, again, he said you'll often find there are intermediates, novices that, because they're not at the top of their game, it doesn't mean they haven't got very, very good birds, but you'll pick the birds up at a much more economical price rather than paying top dollar.
Some people have said that about me.
I can't afford your birds. I actually saw Gerald Binks do something with cod liver oil, which when he did it, I thought this is daft. I can't understand what that is doing. He had a 20-kilo sack of seed, and he got a teaspoon of cod liver oil, and he put it into the seed and he stirred it up. I said, "What are you doing with that?" And he said, "I'm just giving them a little glaze." He said, "You don't want much." He said, it will go right through them. It causes them problems. And believe me, that's all you need for that quantity of seed. And I thought, well, it's hardly even worth it because a lot of the seeds aren't even going to get covered.
Yeah.
But that's why I'm saying you have to be so careful. And I have actually given cod liver oil to a bird that was egg bound because I was about to lose her. So I thought, what I'll do, I'll put it straight with a crop needle into a crop, and she passed the egg within an hour. But then, unfortunately, she died because obviously the cod liver oil was far too much for her.
Yeah. I mean, I bought quite a big container this time by mistake, really. And I'm not sure I'm going to use it all before I start to think, I'm not happy with that. So, yeah, next time I should just buy small amounts.
Just need to be careful.
Yeah. Right. Shall we share some of these photographs?
Some of the experiences, yeah.
So here we go.
This here is an outcross hen I got in on the right hand side, cinnamon grey hen, and unbeknown to me, she was a double factor yellowface. So every single chick that was produced from that pairing came out as a yellowface, and they were stonking birds. And I've still got some of her offspring now that are doing very well on the show bench. So she did me a real favour, but it came as a real shock when they started to come out. So it's always worth making sure you really check the pedigree of any bird with the breed that you're buying from. I just bought her based on a photograph because she looked good. But you really need to go into it because you just don't know what's in the background.
No. So I think we were going to skip that one because we didn't have the other photograph, weren't we?
We haven't got the backup photograph with it.
Yeah. So this is your easily, isn't it?
That's one of my first easily hens that I bred on the left-hand side. And if you look at her head, she's got a tiny little bit of ticking, but not much. And again, if you look at the spots and the makeup of the spots around her mask, it's not too intense. If you go to the next picture, and you can see now that the spots have got more blotchy. The top of the head has got these blotches on, and that was caused by calcium deficiency. She actually went lame, almost as if she'd had a stroke. And she was rearing chicks, and she was literally crawling up the bars with one foot, pulling herself up with beak and foot and getting back and looking. It was an amazing feat of nature. And I started to give her Calcivet. And after about a week, she started to show signs of improving. And in the end, she got herself back to normal again. But all that blotchiness on the head was the first indication that something wasn't right. And if you'd like to show a couple more pictures now of those two yellow faces. No, that's an eye problem.
We might have to skip. Yeah, I think I've put them in the wrong place. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, well, there's one of them. You can see the mark on the top of the heads. They're almost as if someone's smudged them. Well, if I was to tell you that both those hens were perfectly clear, not a mark on them, before they went in the breeding cage. And it was whilst they were going through the breeding process that these blotches started to appear. And again, it's the indication that I had a calcium problem in the shed. So I had to take the birds out because they were starting to lay eggs with those bubbles in. Yeah. They weren't getting soft shells, but I was getting the ones with bubbles. And the eggs just weren't what they should be. So in the end, I mean, they're still with me now. They're still in the flight, and they've got a lot better since I've been treating them. But it's something for people to watch out for, and you need to be observant with your birds. I mean, there's no point in having birds going to see them in the morning, and then last thing at night, and then making sure their food bowls are topped up. You need to look at them. You need to inspect them, make sure that everything's okay. And things like this can be helped if you catch the signs early.
Yeah. So I know your feeding is no different to anybody. I'm sure you use soft food and that. So how do you think they became deficient?
I really don't know, Neil. I really don't know. I was talking to my partner this afternoon, and he said, "Well, are you giving them broccoli?" And I said, "No, I don't give them broccoli." He said, "Well, give them broccoli with just a spraying of olive oil, a misting of olive oil on it." He said, because broccoli is obviously high in vitamin D. So I will start trying that. I don't know, because I never used to have this issue. I'm not saying I haven't had issues, but I've had different issues.
Yeah,
and this is something. This is something that I'm battling with, and I've got problems now. I've got chicks which are not developing properly, or like you were saying earlier, where chicks are leaving the nest and they look perfectly fine. They're starting to fly, but they're not eating. You're having to feed them. Yeah. And even though other birds are in the nursery cage and they're feeding themselves and everything else, these ones just, for whatever reason, they just will not eat. Whether you give them red millet or whatever. And again, I think this is something to do with the calcium deficiency. I think that splayed legs has got something to do with calcium deficiency. Because why is it that a bird just suddenly get a splayed leg? You might get one out of a nest of 5 and then it not happen next time. Yeah. Why does it happen? And I think if we can, I mean, the crazy thing is, I read once before that a budgie only needs 20 minutes of sunlight a day to charge up its reserves of calcium. Now, I've got an open flight, but a lot of the older birds won't go out there. The young birds they're like teenagers. They're buzzing around everywhere. But the older birds are quite content to stay indoors, if you like, where there is some natural light, but not that much, and certainly no sunlight because the sun's coming around the back of the building. But they are so limited as to where they can actually get the calcium to them, because the sunlight has to penetrate around the edges of the beak and the feet primarily, because they're the exposed areas where the sun can get to. So really, we all need to be thinking about how we're keeping these birds topped up effectively. because it doesn't just affect the hens; it affects the cocks as well. And I've had quite a few cases in the past where a cock will go lame, almost limp. It's almost as if there's no life left in the foot. And again, you start whacking him with calcium in the water and what have you, and topping him up with calcium, and then he will recover in a very, very short period of time. But why is it happening? And I still can't get my head around it. I give them cuttle, I give them grit. I know they're carbonate, so their bodies take a lot to generate the vitamin D out of it, or the calcium out of it. But I give them other things as well. I give them mineral blocks. I give them foodstuffs. I don't tend to put a lot on the soft food. And my soft food is fairly basic because I've found in the past they will eat it, but they don't eat much of it when it's wet and soggy. You give them a bowl of dried groats or oats with other things in, and I actually use Simon Gage's fortified oat groats, and they love them. They absolutely knock them to death, especially when they're rearing chicks. But I don't want to overdose them on all these things. I just need to find something as a natural way of doing it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I ended up going.
I'm open to ideas. I really am.
Yeah, I mean, I just went down because I've written an article. It should be out in the Cage and Aviary this week, and and in there it's only a brief article, but I said I'd thrown everything at them and still had problems, and then I started to research, how other people fed birds, and I kept looking at canaries, and no, that didn't really fit, and then all of a sudden I fell on poultry, and they'd done the hard work for me because they could get a hen to lay perfect eggs, not all year round, but some of them do lay all year round. And so I started to look, and I started with the chick crumbs and all of that, and thought, no, I don't like this, and that's where I landed with the Garvo. And like you say, if I make it too wet, they won't eat. They'll eat it, but they're not happy. But if I just get it crumbly with the veg and the other bits in, then there is nothing left. Even the kibbled maize, which is rock hard, is dust at the end of the day.
Wow.
There is nothing left. And there's bits of hard barley and all sorts in there that, of course, the chicken would just pick up. It's all gone. It's all gone. And I believe me, I've searched for it to make sure it wasn't just me, and it's not there. It's gone. So but my birds get very little in the way of additional seed. They get millet and they get canary. That's it. Anything else I want to feed goes in that soft food. So whether that be dry groats, soaked seed, I mean, I'll even strip millet sprays into it rather than chucking a spray in. And that is how I do it. Because again, I'm always concerned of having, with these bigger hens, having too much fat, those fatty seeds, sunflowers, groats and all that, and them going over the top, so but yeah, I mean, it's worked for me so far. But when you look at the ingredients of the Garvo, there is nothing else really you need to add. I do add a little bit of more calcium powder.
Where do you get it from? I've not heard of Garvo.
It's an Italian company, I think, but I get it just off Amazon. I just search around. As long as I always get the Garvo 730. There is a really nice one with herbs, but it's sometimes really hard to get hold of. So I've just stuck to the 730 now. And yeah, I think I'd probably, it's got to be 4 or 5 years into use, 4 years at least, if not coming into the 5th year now. Of using
oh my God. I mean, to be honest with you, I went through some really, really bad times over the recent years with all manner of problems.
Yeah.
And I said to my wife, I said, I just don't know what I'm doing wrong. She said, well, what are you doing? I said, well, I've tried this and I've tried that. She said, well, what did you do in the beginning? I said, well, I did it how I used to do it when I was, 12
Yeah.
years old and what have you. She said, and you were breeding lots of birds? I said, yeah. She said, well, do the same again then. See, the trouble is, she said, you're listening to too many people,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you're kind of going off at tangents. It's a bit like we were talking about fishing. A lot of the tackle is there to catch the angler, not the fish.
Yeah.
And we've got the same thing with birds. Everyone feels they want to give as best they can for their birds, but
Yeah.
is it the right thing? Are we doing the right thing?
I mean, it's
I
like,
went back to basics, and I had a wonderful time. I bred more than I've done in ages, but
yeah.
I'm getting other issues now, and this is it's hard work. It really is.
But I think when I went back to basics, I really, really went back to basics. It was like seed, water, and a cuttlefish. And then I built up on that because I knew in my heart that that really wasn't going to be enough for the type of bird that I was breeding then. But I'm just glad I didn't go back to what I was doing, because I knew that wasn't, because it would have been really easy to slip back into that, buying everything, trying everything. And it took a lot of willpower for me just to know, let's just find one thing that is going to work. That's it. That's what I want. So yeah, I'm just going to skip these photos back to the beginning. So that was that one. So yeah, so eye problems.
Yeah.
So I mean, have you actually, is this diagnosed as anything, conjunctivitis, or?
No, it's not. I mean, they're infections, and obviously there are different types of infection you get. Some are just restricted to the eyes. Others cause nasal discharge, and the only way to describe it is a snotty nose. They get a crusting of like a yellow mucus over the nares. That one's actually clear there, but that is a separate problem. Ivermectin actually works well for the snotty nose scenario. I've tried lots of different things, and I was in touch with avian vets, and I took the birds there, and I was getting these tablets and these creams and that cream, and everybody's saying use golden eye, and all the old boys were saying use cold tea bags, and to try and find a solution. And in the end, the only product that I found to actually work on eyes and work effectively is Maxitrol, which is a drop that we have for human eye problems.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's like a lot of the things that really work well, you can only get them on prescription. But Maxitrol is unbelievably good. As long as you keep up the dosage, a bird like you can see in that picture there will be completely cured. And I have spent so much time, so much money with avian vets giving me this and giving me that, and I found the Maxitrol. I was told about that by Alex Warren a few years ago.
Yeah.
And I was able to source some on the internet from Bulgaria or wherever it was, and I tried it, and it was superb. And now I make sure I've always got some at hand.
See,
and I was only go on.
Sorry, go on.
As I was only treating a bird the other day with it.
Yeah.
And I find it so useful because a lot of chicks get eye problems where there's a lot of dust in the nest boxes and what have you. And you sometimes see one with a gummy eye where it's all stuck up. Well, a little bit of Maxitrol on the eye there, because the other thing with it contains something that stops the irritation.
Yeah.
So it stops them rubbing, and it's the rubbing that causes the inflammation.
Yeah. Yeah, it's probably an anti-inflammatory type thing. But because I went through a stage of what my dad would call dirty wattles, which is what a pigeon's sear nose is called as such. And straight away, it when I looked and spoke to Kevin, we said, right, look at the levels of vitamin A in what you're feeding, and there was vitamin A there. That, it's got that in it. But I added in sweet potato, and touch wood, I haven't had one for probably a year or so.
Yeah.
And also I went through a stage of having some birds, mainly, not all hens, but mainly hens, with the preen gland cyst. And again, we put that down to lack of vitamin A. I have had one baby with a problem, but that was more of an ingrowing hair than a preen gland cyst, because she's quite a rough,
But
fluffy feather.
that's very interesting about the prune gland, because Daniel Lutov, when he was over last year at the Mid Essex show, he went back to my partner Etisham's bird room the following day, and he literally picked every bird up and checked every bird for cysts and what have you, and he removed quite a lot of feathers from the preen gland area. In fact, by the time he was finished, it looked like a cat had got in and killed every bird in the flight. There was feathers everywhere. But he said if you have that management system where you keep the feathers away from the gland, then you won't have the problems that, with the cyst developing.
Yeah. Well, mine, I mean, I wouldn't say mine had feathers. Mine just was like an inflammation of the actual gland. There was
Yeah.
some I did open up and clean out and that, and there was never any feathers in there. But they weren't very pleasant. But yeah, so I mean, I like to run things for 2 years before I start to sort of analyze too much. And it was older birds that I was getting this in. So, I'd use them for a year. And I went to pair them up for the second year, and oh my God, you've got a huge cyst,
Yeah.
So, but fingers crossed, because although we say keep a stud young, I do tend to keep birds probably a little bit longer than I should, but I'm not a great one for selling. So
Yeah, it's strange. I thought Connor Hickman's routine was quite brutal, actually. But I can understand why he does what he does now. He will only keep a hen for 1 year, and then she's gone. And he said a cock bird has to be of an exceptional quality to stand 2 years in his shed, and then it's moved on.
Yeah.
He keeps the shed young.
Yeah. See, what I've done is I've tended to keep the quality. My bar I set pretty high for the cockbirds, and to get into the top 20 or 25, some cocks, as a barhead, you're not going to make that at all. But I have messed up a couple of times on Sky Blue, so they tend to stay a bit longer these days.
Well, they develop, don't they? For some reason,
seem to be. Yeah, I don't know why, but yeah. So it's very difficult, because I think some years you don't breed the quality in a certain sex. Some years you'll have a few good cocks and a few good hens. Following year, like last year, that was my case. I've had a few good hens and a few good cocks. Year before, I couldn't breed a decent hen to save my life, but I kept them all.
You see, now the strange thing about what you're saying there is, we have to put two hats on here. One is the breeding, and the other is the showing. We all know that a stonking good hen in a show cage is not going to be good in a breeding cage.
No.
Not unless somebody is using artificial insemination, because they just don't work. They just waste time. So going back to what Gerald Bink said to me right back in the beginning, he said, never worry about the hen. obviously, you get it. Your hen's got to be of a reasonable quality, but it doesn't have to be an absolute showboat. The whole thing about a hen, he said, it's a factory. It's an egg producer. It's a rearer of chicks. And he said the cock is there for the style and the swagger. So you put a big cock to a reasonable hen bird. But you try and put big to big, it's just a mitigating disaster.
Yeah.
So I would much rather have a shed full of, typey hens, stylish hens, than ones with great big heads that are not going to do me any good further down the road.
Well, this year, a lot of my good hens have come from those type of hens. The hens I bred last year, or that I didn't think were. Yeah, they certainly weren't show birds, but like you say, they're stock birds, aren't they? So, because many times, how many times have we said, kept the sister to the best bird, and the sister was the only one that bred,
Exactly.
So a similar eye problem, or was that something slightly different, that one?
No, that was quite extreme, this one. And in fact, this is one that went to the vets because he was a lovely cockbird. He was Oakland, and as you know, you don't really get many good Oaklands, not that are clean.
I was going to say, yeah.
And so clean, I tried everything I could to save him and save his eye. And in fact, in the end, the vets operated, and they blinded him in one eye through the operation. And he did live on, but he was never quite the same afterwards. But I think had I had Maxitrol in those days, I'd have got to it a lot quicker, and it wouldn't have become as inflamed as it had. If you were able to zoom in on that eye, you'd see how bad it really is. And a lot of it, you can see his tiny little eye there and all the inflammation around it.
Yeah. Blimey. Yeah.
But you see some breeders, if they get that, it's another picture of his eye again. They will just bump them on the head. They won't persevere with them. But I felt,
that's right,
because he was so good, and obviously you can't really see it there in that picture, but you can see how clean he is. I really wanted to give him every possible chance I could. I just unfortunately got him with a veterinary practice that weren't really experienced in small birds.
Yeah.
And they were just going through the motions.
Yeah, very difficult.
I thought I was doing the right thing, because they keep saying, "Oh, we're doing this and we're doing that," but shame. And that one's the same thing, but that is more of a case. This one where he's blooded because it's irritated and he's rubbed it, and it's the rubbing which the Maxitrol stops, as I said earlier, because it kind of stops the eye from itching.
Yeah.
And it repairs. The other thing I do, and you can see him, I cut away a lot of the feathers from around the eye, because one of the problems is when their eyes start to weep, the feathers start to get matted, and then they can point inwards into the eye, causing even more irritation because you've now got a stiff bunch of feathers poking into the eye. So I always cut them. But of course, when they're all matted together, you've got to be very careful because the skin may be pulled up in areas, so you don't want to cut them too tight.
I must admit, a few years ago, I bred that type of bird where the directional feather not only was directional, but it was coming back around the eyes.
Yeah.
And I had quite a few problems, and I always vowed not to or try not to breed that type of bird. Which, so far so good. I've kept the directional, but I've kept it further forward, but yeah, we do make our own problems sometimes, don't we?
Oh, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. Just this picture. This is of a normal seed dish on the floor. But I said earlier, you can help yourself by observation. And if you spend time just looking at the birds in the nest boxes, looking at the birds on the perches, keeping an eye out for things like block vents, which is a common occurrence, and you can save the life of a bird if you catch it quickly and just unblock it where it's just got matted up with all the feathers. This here is an indication of candida. And how I found out about it was by looking at the behavior of the birds in and around the food dish. So a normal bird will come up to a food dish and it will just stand on the edge and peck away and take a few seeds and whatever it wants. A bird that is suffering from candida actually will climb into the food dish and literally go through everything to find the smallest grains, effectively. Because when a bird is suffering from that kind of problem, which is a type of thrush, it actually goes up into the esophagus and shuts it up. So the bird's passage for swallowing food gets smaller and smaller. So they have to crunch and really break down the seeds almost to a dust. And that's another indication. If you see that your food bowl is not because your seed provider is giving you rubbish seed, a lot of the time it's where the birds are really crunching down everything to get the minute particles in. And people say, oh, I've just lost the bird because it's gone light. Why has it gone light? Well, it's candida, because it's not getting the food in. So it's eating. You think it's eating, not a problem, but it's wasting away because effectively the thrush is eating the food that it's eating.
Yeah.
So it's and they're always at the tray. So if you another thing is you put fresh seed in there, the birds that are really having issues will go straight for it because they want to get to the nice food for them to work on. So observation is a fantastic cure. Because once you can see that something's not right, you can address it.
Yeah. Well, funny enough, that brings me on to one of my other problems a few years ago, and that was avian TB. Because I was sending all these birds off for testing and, wanted to know why I was getting all these addled eggs. I mean, I sent away batches of eggs, dead birds, live birds. But of course, when they were testing, they found avian TB. And of course, my world ended. I thought, well, that's it. I might as well just pack up now. And I went back to Kevin because Kevin couldn't do the tests at the time, so I had them done. Oh no, I think he did actually. I sent stuff to him, sent birds to him, and he said, no, don't panic. He said, what you want to do is separate your ages of birds. So push anything over a year old into one flight and keep all the babies in another flight and let nature take its course. Okay. And what I was finding was those birds were coming to the seed dish. They were eating. They had a full crop, but you could shave with them. They were that thin. And it's a slow burner. You won't see any signs in a 1, maybe 2-year-old, but from sort of 3 years onwards, they go downhill very slowly. And that's what was happening, of course. And then I wasn't selling birds because I was having problems. So I had lots of birds, too many birds. But ever since I've separated the ages, not the sexes, but the ages, it's not been a problem. But what I have been told is most studs or most collections of birds will have this in them. It's just one of those things that's throughout the hobby, but it's certainly a way of certainly controlling it.
Again, breeders don't understand the problem they've got, and they just think it's one that's got sick, and this could be an expensive bird you brought in, so you need to be aware of what these problems are, or at least know the signs.
That's right. Well, that's another one of the.
That one is one where he's got the snotty nose. Can you actually see the discharge around the nair?
Yeah.
If you zoom in a bit there, you can see it all milky.
Yeah.
It's like a snotty nose. It's clear. And then as I said, ivermectin actually cleared that up.
Yeah. some sort of parasite in there, but I
I
wouldn't have
don't know.
thought so.
No, I
No,
don't.
could have
I
just
think
been coincidence,
it's
I
actually
suppose.
Kevin Eatwell. Kevin Eatwell suggested using ivermectin, and it really did work.
Yeah, strange. That's
That's
another eye.
it's the same Oakland
Oh yeah,
cobalt.
that really is swollen, isn't it?
Yeah, it was awful, absolutely awful.
Well, that was the two birds we looked at.
Oh, that was one of my prize easily clear bodies.
Yes,
She was
yeah, we
gorgeous.
put these at the end, didn't we? Just as a
Yeah.
yeah, because you don't see many Easleys, really, do you? Especially quality. I
No,
think
I
they're still a
mean,
rare bird,
funny
aren't they?
thing was, I think it's a Marmite breed. You know, some breeders will and judges look upon them as a normal in a clear body class, and others actually recognise them for being a variety.
Yeah.
And I had one in a show a couple of weeks ago, and I think there were six in the any age class, and it came fifth. The same bird and the same bird that it came that was put into the next show, it won the CC.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in both those two events, somebody else, another breeder, had a bird that came second each time. So where's the logic in that?
Yeah. I mean, I don't keep rares.
He's come second to my bird coming fifth, and then he's come second to my bird winning the CC.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't keep rares at all, really. I mean, I've had dilutes in the past, but only because they were quality. They were some of the ones I swapped with David Wone in the end, because I didn't want a shed full of them. But what I didn't realise was they fizzled out. The quality of visuals went down. There's still splits out there, and I think last year I think I had my first ever grey white. Made a lovely pet. And that was about it. But I mean, like this year, I've bought in a dominant pied, and I've bred two cracking cinnamon violets.
Yeah.
So it's like I just keep the quality. I'm not particularly worried about mutations or varieties or anything. But
Well, it's actually, well, I'll come on to something about that in dominant parts. This is, if you can zoom into the head a little bit, this bird goes back to about 2020, I think. I was really pleased with him when I bred him, but I didn't realise quite what I'd bred. And if you look at the cheek patches, they're almost an anthracite, charcoaly grey colour. They're not the pale, greyish blue that you'd normally associate with a grey. And his body colour is a couple of shades on from a normal light grey. So he's basically a dark factor grey. And I didn't realise until I paired him up that it didn't matter what I put him to. It's a bit like a double factor yellow face. Everything comes out grey. It doesn't matter what it is. It completely takes over. So I've never had that issue with any other colour that I've bred, i.e. two sky blues to two sky blues, but it does happen with greys.
yeah,
You will get, I think it's about 25% chance of a dark factor coming out if you put grey to grey.
yeah, because it's double factor grey,
happens.
isn't it? It's a double factor grey. That's what
Yeah.
it is.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. But why does it do it with those and not the? Oh, I suppose possibly I suppose two light greens. A dark green is perhaps the equivalent of a dark factor grey. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the difference is, I suppose if you put a dark green, would every chick come out light green? If it was to another, but I don't think it does. I think a dark green will throw blues out as well, won't it? Whereas
I've had
a dark factor grey will just throw greys.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's a double factor grade because that's what I've had in the past. You don't get very many, like you say, it's only 25% or so. But yeah, I've had one double factor grey hen, and everything was grey. It was, and I'd bred her the year before from putting the two greys together. But all of her siblings were single factors. So
Yeah.
yeah.
But I remember a few years ago there was a top breeder who was selling those greys, and they were anthracites in his opinion.
Oh, right.
And of course, they were very, very big, not like the normal rare anthracite you see. And as a consequence, they were being sold for reasonable amounts of money, and all they were was dark factor greys.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
can see that. You can see that.
I mean, sometimes we call
But,
them. You can get a violet grey, can't you? That grey carrying the violet factor, and paired up right, you can breed true violets from them. So, but yeah,
yeah, no, that's the beauty of budgies. You've got just so many colours at your fingertips. But I just want to go back to, it was only you talking about the pied um, that made me think of something that's happened recently this year. I had a cinnamon sky hen, a cinnamon grey hen to a cinnamon sky dominant pied cock. And they had 5 eggs. First 3 were fertile and the last 2 weren't. And when all the eggs hatched off, they were all black-eyed. And I'm thinking to myself, cinnamon to cinnamon will only produce cinnamon. Those should have been cinnamon chicks.
yeah,
But they weren't. Every single one of them was black-eyed. And I have lost 2 of the chicks now, because I think they've been troubled with this bloody deficiency that I've been having. But the one that survived, and one of its siblings was the same, it's a golden face cobalt, I think it is, pied. And I was saying to everybody, how the hell could that have come out of the pairing that I've got? Now, the obvious thing is that she was got at in the flight, and I do have a golden face pied, but I'd already moved him into another breeding cage at the same time as I paired her up with this cinnamon blue pied. And they've been in the cage for about a week. And I hadn't had much hope because the cock I'd tried with loads of other hens before, and he was never interested. But all of a sudden, I noticed he was going in the nest box, and I thought, oh, blimey, they bonded. And then she started laying. And then when the first 3 eggs were fertile, I thought, blimey, that's good. But she's carried that sperm from a flight mating.
yeah,
And you're talking about almost possibly about 15 days from when she was in the cage to when she laid the last of the 3 fertile eggs.
wow, yeah, yeah. I mean, I always try and avoid that by splitting the sexes. But then I say only 3
not
weeks
everyone's
before.
got that. Not everyone can do that, but
No.
it only goes to show. You think that's a good pairing. They've produced. I mean, this chick is fantastic, by the way, and you think, oh, that's a great pairing. And then if they have a second round, you think, hang on, what's going on here? They're not as good as the first time round. But I knew it. I knew people say, oh, they can hold it in their bodies, but effectively it means that just one mating has stayed with her for that length of time.
Yeah, yeah. Amazing,
which is staggering.
Yeah, definitely.
And I say I've never experienced it before. I don't know if I've experienced, because I just assumed that any chicks that have come from any pairing are from the pairing I put together.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, we've chewed the fat for a while.
Yeah, we certainly have.
Yeah, and and hopefully, people will take a little bit away from this, even if it's just to be more vigilant. I always say that, even pet owners should be doing body condition checks, even if that's just weighing a bird, getting the bird to stand on scales or whatever. So yeah, but bird health is something,
I do feel that pet owners and obviously the UKBC has quite a lot of pet owners.
Yeah.
They are obviously very attentive towards their birds, very emotionally tied, because often it's a single bird that they've got. And they want the best for their bird. And so the first time the bird starts sneezing or coughing, or it's got its head under its wing, they're worried. But I think we as breeders can help to calm people down a little bit, because I've had quite a few situations locally where I've had pet owners contact me. I've got this problem, and there are things that are wrong with their birds that we kind of say, yeah, we know what that is. That's going to be an easy fix or whatever. But to them, it's straight down the vets.
Yeah.
An £80, £100 bill, if not more, with a vet that probably hasn't got a clue, because I don't know whether you found it from experience with going to vets. Very few have got specialist avian vets and avian vets that know about small birds. I mean, Kevin is an exception as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
I've only got one within about a 30, 40 mile radius that I know that you can go to, and there is someone there that knows about small birds.
Yeah.
But the last time I went there, it cost me 460 quid.
Yeah.
And we can help these pet breeders pet owners a little bit more by reassuring them that sometimes what they're worrying about isn't necessarily a major problem, and it's something with a little bit of time, the bird will get back on its feet again.
Yeah. I mean, I think scaly face is probably one of the most common ailments that we see. And I've got several people around me that, they've had scaly mite, and I've just dropped on the old ivermectin, gone back a couple of weeks later, done another drop, and it's done, but they were really worried,
Yeah, I was only reading some articles tonight where people were going again over the top, moxidectin in the water. No, you just need ivermectin, on the back. And I've actually taken it further than that. I've had one or two cases, because we all get them from time to time, and I actually put the ivermectin around the beak itself. If you pull back the feathers round the beak, you got that kind of flaps of skin. Well, they might get in there, and that's where sometimes the biggest infestations are. And you actually apply the drops to both sides, and it really gets to them quicker than putting it on the nape of the neck, because you're actually putting it where the birds are.
Yeah. The only trouble with the problem with pet ones is that person, if we can't help as breeders, they can't necessarily catch or don't want to catch their bird. That's where the moxidectin comes in, but they don't want to break that trust they've got with their birds, and I mean the moxie does work, so it's quite a good,
Well, I had a lady come around who I know very well, and she gets hysterical, because she is so devoted to the welfare of her birds. And this time round, she's taken the bird to the vet, and I said, "Why did you do that?" She said, "Oh, because I didn't want to bother you. You were on holiday, and I was really worried about it." And so the vet's given her, I think it was 2 or 3 different types of antibiotic or whatever it's got, and she's got to apply them. And she said, "I can't. I've tried to do it. I can't catch him. I can't do this." I said, "Look, just bring him round, and I'll crop feed them. I'll get it done." And I said to her, "Why are you really doing this?" And she said, "Well, I had to do something." And the vet said, he might have this and he might have that. And I said, "Look, I can see he's fine." She said, "But he's not eating." I said, "But he's got a full crop of food. I can feel it." She said, "Well, it's only because I gave him some of the red millet you gave me." I said, "Well, it doesn't matter. If he hasn't got an appetite, he won't eat. But he is eating, so you're worrying unnecessarily. His foot that you first thought was a major problem is getting better. He's got a little cut on there, so that explains that." I said, "What are you doing now?" She said, "Well, I'm going to go back to the vet again because the vet wants to give me." I said, don't do it. Just don't do it. Don't do it. You're just going to throw more money away." And I saw her last night. I said, "How's the bird?" She said, "He's absolutely fine."
Yeah.
And that's the problem. It's because the vet she's gone to didn't really have a proper clue as to what was going on.
No, they just give them broad spectrum antibiotics and hope they've hit the one problem with whatever they've given them. Yeah. So
yeah. No,
brilliant.
it's
Well,
wrong.
thank
But
you so
I
much.
think we can help. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, it's brilliant. Thank you very much, mate. It was really appreciated. I know we wanted to do this for a little while. And good luck with the fishing tomorrow. May the tench grace your net.
Yeah, tinker,
Yes.
tinker, here we come.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thanks very much, mate.
All right. Lovely,
Bye-bye.
Neil. Have a good evening. Thank you. Bye-bye.